Darren Barrett, welcome to What's Possible.
Hey, good to see you, Ilene. I'm super excited to be here.
Great to have you on the show. And for our listeners, I was compelled to bring Darren on the show, not only because he is an SVC executive coach, but we were having this amazing conversation around comparing athletes and leaders. And Darren is
hmm
actually getting his diploma of sports psychology right now. And so he is in the thick of studying kind of what makes an athlete, what brings an athlete to their peak performance, and his brain, coming from the executive coaching world, keeps on finding connection between leadership and sport and athletes. And so I thought, you know what? Let's talk about it. Let's hear what you're learning and what kind of pieces you're putting together. So, Darren, before we jump into that, I just want to ask you to share with our audience what makes Darren Barrett tick.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that one, Eileen.
That's why I asked you.
I talk about helping leaders discover the joy of leadership. That's something that, gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
And when I think about leadership, and I was a leader for many years at Nike, Peloton, Body Shop, and, leadership's a privilege. And I think people don't always enjoy leadership as they should because they're not always set up for success and a whole heap of reasons which we could get into now, but that's another topic. But yeah, that's kind of what gets me out of bed in the morning, if that answers your question.
It does. And now I'm going to ask you. So, Darren, while he is based in the UK, he does coaching across the globe. And he was
hmm
just saying that much of his coaching right now, he's doing a lot in the US. And so sometimes his day will start at noon, go straight through till the evening. So that gives him the whole morning to himself. And you were saying, I love having the morning to myself because I get to do my things. So give
yeah,
us a little window into what are some of the things you love to do.
so I'm afraid I have to confess that I work out daily, which starts with a cold plunge. I'm
Oh,
fanatical about my cold. Yeah, I know, right? I'm fanatical about my cold plunge in the morning, and then I work out after the plunge. That kind of sets my day up. I have that moment of meditation in the cold water, and then I work out, and such an important thing for my well-being. And I miss that if I don't have that with me. Um, I like to walk my dog, spend time with family. I'm very privileged to live in the countryside, so I've access to space really, really quickly. Sometimes it's just get a coffee and sit on a terrace and watch the world go by. Cambridge is a city close by. It's a beautiful place to be, so I get to hang out there, or my local town, Saffron Walden, which recently was voted the number one place to live in the UK by the
oh,
Sunday
wow.
Times. So I'm very
Wow.
privileged where I live.
Ah, I love it. Well, and I love that you are walking the walk, talking the talk, and investing in your well being through movement, through mindfulness, through just being too.
Yeah,
How beautiful.
absolutely.
All right. So now, of course, the obvious question, you're an executive coach, you've worked for all these large organizations. Why diploma in sports psychology? What brought you there?
So this is easy for me to answer because I remember the moment just like it was yesterday. My wife treated me as a birthday gift for an evening with Sir Bradley Wiggins. Do you know who Sir Bradley Wiggins is?
No, but I feel like I need to.
And it's okay if you don't, right? Uh, he's in a very specific field. He's an Olympic gold medalist. At one point, was the most successful Olympian ever for Team GB. He's the winner of the Tour de France
Oh,
cycling race, yeah, a very well-known athlete and personality in the UK.
well,
So
and
we'd
I have
gone
a
to.
feeling my friends are going to be disappointed in me, all my Olympic following friends. So I apologize right up front.
Yeah, and maybe I put you on the spot with that one, Eileen. Maybe that was unfair. But we were spending this evening, this intimate evening, listening to Sir Bradley talk, and he spoke about his lifestyle, his life as an athlete, and the contracting that we do as coaches that he actually interestingly did with his wife around how they would live their life together. And it really was very detailed in terms of how they work together. And he's told a story that was very embarrassing for him about when they go and do the grocery shopping, or maybe when they go on vacation. His wife was there loading all the groceries into the trunk of the car, and people are watching, saying, "Why is he standing there while his wife's doing the heavy lifting?" Or you know that moment when you go on vacation and you lift that suitcase onto the weigh
Suitcase, yeah.
scales, and Bradley standing there with his arms folded, watching his wife lift these heavy cases onto the scales. And this was part of their contract, Tim, because they were set up to maximize his opportunity as an athlete, to be the best in the world, the number one in his chosen sport. And risking an injury through something like lifting a suitcase or carrying the
Yeah.
groceries could
Yeah.
seriously impact his career. So he and his wife made this deal together that this is how we're going to roll until we achieve what we want to achieve. And it was such an incredible story listening, and I didn't do it justice, but can you imagine that? So you're
Well,
so seriously
so focused, yeah.
focused, right, on your thing, that you'll go to any length to make it happen. Thought it was
But, of course,
amazing.
I'm sitting here thinking, now I'd love to talk to his wife and hear her version of the story. But anyway, that's
Right, right. I'm sure she's doing okay. I'm sure she's doing okay. So that started me to think, and he spoke about the athlete life cycle, and I started to sort of gather my own thoughts around that. And where I landed is that, and what I know about other athletes in performing, and this life cycle is one of train, perform, and recover. Train, perform, recover. This is how athletes roll when you boil it down, right? And at the
yeah,
time, I was working with Canyon Bicycles, the largest
yeah.
direct-to-consumer bike manufacturer in the world. And I was working with the leadership team at Canyon, and I introduced this notion of train, perform, recover during one of our team coaching sessions. Um, and I compared the C-suite at Canyon, the number one in the world, to a top athlete. And my question was, how are you living your life? What
Mhm.
does your life cycle look like when you're at the top of your game? And it was
Yeah.
very interesting, the conversation that came thereafter.
I would imagine it's perform, 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 and oftentimes there is no training and rarely recover. Am I
Absolutely.
close?
You've hit the nail on the head. You've hit the nail on the head. So it was really interesting that it was trained maybe a little sometimes, perhaps, you know, occasionally, but for all too many, never, which was
Yeah.
a surprise.
Mhm.
But then, yes, very much perform, 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 perform. You see where this is going, right? You've
Mhm.
called it
Yeah.
yourself. And then recover, maybe a vacation with the laptop, with the work phone, maybe a weekend with a few calls, thrown in, perhaps evening dinner with the family, but often distracted. And for me, this failure to get this balance right, this perform, 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 is where burnout lives if the balance is
Yeah.
way off. So it was really interesting to have this conversation with this team and have them think about what do those three elements look like for them. And often now when I work with execs, we do a specific exercise where we draw that pie and we discuss, what's the train part in your life? What's the performance part look like? You know, what does the recovery part look like? And it really does
Yeah.
lead to some fascinating and eye-opening discussions for leaders.
All right, walk us through. I'm curious, as you're working with a leader, how do you A, broach this subject, and what do you do with it when they say, "Yeah, I perform, perform, perform because I don't have another option." There's no time to recover. There's no time for training, or my
Yeah,
organization doesn't offer training.
yeah. This often comes down to choices, doesn't it? Because I think we have more agency than we actually allow ourselves to believe at times. And I've
Yeah,
been a leader in large global companies. I've had teams myself, scattered around Europe, and I've been in that role. So I'm not just speaking from the experience of a coach. I'm speaking from
right.
somebody who spent 30 years leading global teams. Um,
Yeah,
and actually, I introduced this by making the comparison, right? As I said, with the Canyon team, you're at the top of your game, you know, and we've spoken about the notion of business athlete, right? And we've tried
yeah.
to define what a business athlete means through that comparison. And I think what's important is, and this does resonate with leaders, when things are not going so well for top athletes, they double down on the training,
Mm,
right? They
yeah,
train harder. They analyze performance with their coach. They reflect, they tweak, they adjust to get things back on track. When things are not going so well for leaders, and we've all done this, I'm sure you too, Eileen, we double down on effort.
yeah, yeah,
We work even harder. We put in even more time because that's what we're conditioned to do. When things are not going well, we're conditioned to work even harder. And too few
yeah,
leaders take time to analyze or even reflect, and obviously work with a coach to help them figure stuff out. And I think
yeah,
that for me is something that really hits home, that message, that comparison when you talk to leaders. We're so used to, rather than breaking down the elements of what we do, we just work harder
yeah,
because we think that's what we're supposed to do because that's our conditioning. So, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's that head down, work harder, not smarter versus work smarter, not harder. And it's interesting. I just saw Taylor Fritz, who is, one of the top US tennis players and top tennis players in the world.
Hmm.
I saw him play. He was on fire in San Francisco at the Laver Cup, and then he went to play in Japan, and then I think someplace. I think in China. I didn't follow the matches there. I believe he did pretty well in Japan, but then apparently he had lost a match, and I saw him talk about. He said, you know, posted I'm gonna take time to recover. I've been going back to back to back, and I need to recover. And it was spot on what you're talking about. His performance, it sounds like, again, I didn't see the match, but his performance, I think, started to decline. He had been on fire, and then
Hmm.
his performance started to decline. And it wasn't about, let's train more, let me work more with the coach. I'm totally fatigued. I need
Yeah.
time to take off so that I can come back stronger. And as leaders, we don't do that as much.
Yeah, and recovery is a great topic or a great element of this life cycle to talk about now, because when we think about recovery, it's important to think about the quality of recovery. As I mentioned earlier, we take this vacation, but actually we don't, right? The laptop comes with
Yeah.
us, the work phone comes with us, you know? Once leaders are hooked into this way of thinking, once they start to embrace this notion of, you know, train, perform, recover, and we start to break down each element, we start to examine the recovery piece, we examine the training piece, we examine where do we really need to perform and when is it okay for somebody else to perform for us? Because
Yeah.
we all think that the world's going to fall apart if we're not there, right?
Right.
So it's really interesting to talk about how fragmented is your recovery? How disrupted is it? What gets in the way? And to your earlier point, it's often the choices we make, that belief that, yeah, this business is going to fall apart if I'm not at the helm.
Yeah.
And recovery needs to be total. But Eileen, I'd love to hear from you. What gets in the way? What stops us? I'd love to hear your thought. What stops leaders from fully recovering, for taking that time?
Yeah. I would say there's two thoughts coming up. One to based on your question, and then I want to rethink recovery too. But I
Hmm.
think what gets in the way is fear of failure or fear of, I think it's fear probably of,
Hmm.
if I take time to recover, I'm not strong enough. People are going to question my
Right.
ability, my commitment, my dedication, like all those shoulds. I
Yeah.
should be working. I should be X, Y, and Z. And so I think a lot of it is the pressure we put on ourselves that recovery equals laziness, quite
Mm,
frankly. And I think
mm,
we need to rewrite that script in our own mind. And we need to stop judging others and start to look at when somebody else takes time to recover that we're applauding that we are
yeah.
applauding somebody who is investing in self care because we know they will come back stronger. But I think there's also, in a world like we're living in, with employment, a fear of losing your job at the worst case scenario. And if we look at it as a continuum, it's almost on one end is losing your job. Okay, that's the worst. And then on the other end, it's, again, fear of people are going to question my commitment, etc. So I think that's, to me, that's what I think gets in the way, and so it requires rewriting the
Hmm.
script and there's a reframe of what does recovery actually mean. So that's one
Yes.
thing, but I also think we need to look at recovery not as that annual vacation, but how do we recover each and every day? An athlete, if you go back to your cycling, unless they're performing, they're not cycling from, my guess is, and of course, clearly I don't know enough about cycling because I didn't know who the gold medalist was, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I'm guessing even the gold medalist does not wake up at 6 AM and bike ride until 9 PM without a
Yes.
break,
Yeah.
on a normal day. So, why, as leaders, do people need to feel like they need to be up at the crack of dawn, looking at emails, being on meetings, quickly grab a bite, maybe at the desk, ideally not at the desk, but often at the desk, and then go straight through, okay, I'll break for dinner. Break for dinner, that's when people's day usually stops or used to stop. And so I
Yeah.
think, how do we build in recovery throughout the day? Because athletes certainly do. So I'm going to pause there and go back to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I do understand the difference between an athlete and a leader in the workplace, right? A leader doesn't get to perform for a couple of hours in the morning or train for a couple of hours in the morning and then go home and take a nap. I,
Mm.
I understand that. Although some
Yeah,
workplaces now are providing places where
true.
people can take a nap during the day. So, but they can grab lunch. They can, you know, spend some time away from their desk. They could maybe call a friend or a parent and say hi.
Yeah, yeah,
Something to create a distraction, something to create a moment for you in your day where you're not fully focused on what's going on in the world. And I do, or in that business world, in their world. But again, it comes down to choices, Eileen. You can choose to
yeah,
wake up at 6:30 and start work. You can choose to not have dinner with your family because you need to do this or to do that. I think what we've got drawn into is this notion again of working harder versus working. I don't want to say smart,
I know.
working
I don't
well.
love that. Yeah,
Working well, working productively. Again, think about
effectively. Yeah.
effectively. Yes, when you think
Hmm.
about the athlete, they're training in order to perform at their peak.
Hmm.
The recovery is aiding the ability to perform at their peak. There are athletes, I'm sure, that spend way too long training, that spend way too long performing. And then as a result, like your tennis player, the performance dropped because they didn't have the recovery. And I
Yeah,
think the important thing is that the elements are in place and there's balance.
yeah,
Now, I appreciate that balance might be different in the workspace, but nonetheless, the balance is important because if you want to perform when it really matters, then you need to be well thought and well rested. And I
yeah.
think that's the point that leaders have more agency over than we allow ourselves to believe.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point too is we need to understand the upside of recovery because our brains might naturally go to if I recover, then this could happen. And the this is often the negative. If I take time off, somebody else might step in and do my job better. If I take time off, they may replace me or they think I'm lazy or, go on and whatever that narrative is. And if we start to, again, rethink what is the upside of recovery? How do I benefit? And does my team benefit? How does the organization benefit? And if
Mm.
I am well rested and able to think differently, what will be the positive impact on the organization? And that's probably the narrative that we need to create and replace the faulty narrative.
Could not be more true, Eileen. It could not be more true. And I think it does come down to that age-old narrative, of working hard.
Yeah.
And I think we need to rethink that because there are times in a leader's day where they do need to perform. It might be that board presentation. It might be that all hands. It might be that moment when they need to be at their best. But if they're distracted or stressed or tired, they don't show up when those critical moments happen. And these leaders are multipliers, remember. That opportunity in the all hands to inspire, that's when you need to be at your best because
Yeah.
that's where you are the multiplier. If you show up tired and that comes across, if you show up that you haven't really thought about the purpose of the conversation you're in or whatever that might be, that's very, very apparent to the people you're leading. So again, it comes down to defining those performance moments and making sure you're at your best at that time.
Yeah.
And for some people, that's a 100-meter dash. For others, it's an all hands or a board presentation. But the fact remains, when you need to perform at your best, do what it takes to make sure that happens.
So I'm curious, you have a client who comes to you, senior leader in an organization, and they're saying, Darren, beautiful model, train, perform, recover. And I point blank don't have time for the train piece, the recover piece. How do you coach them? What are some things you do to help them start to A, see their agency, and B, start to shift that mindset as to why that train and recover piece is needed for them to perform optimally.
Mm, mm. I think it's a lot about the what if conversation.
Mm,
You know, what if you had time for this? What might that look like? It's about
mm,
discovery, creating possibilities. When do you really want to be at your best? And what stops that from happening? And often it
yeah,
is, right? This moment or that moment, or because I'm tired, or because I just rushed from the last meeting, because, and all of this stuff we know, Eileen, right? Leaders know that. I know that. You know
yeah,
that. So I think it's about creating choice because, there is choice, but importantly, awareness. Is it okay that you continue to show up at 50%, at 60%? Is that okay? Is that what
yeah,
you want people to see from you? Because if you show up like that in a 100-meter sprint, you're way back while the other guys are finished. So I think it's
yeah,
about, creating that tension around what I have and what I'm giving and what I'm offering versus how I want to be giving, how I want to be seen,
yeah,
creating that awareness and that tension. The only motivation for change is an unacceptable reality. So, how do you help leaders recognize that unacceptable reality? I'm not prepared to
yeah,
continue to show up half ready or
yeah.
half energized.
I love that. So it's really that awareness and then intentionality that follows and being
Setting
aware of,
intention.
yeah, the consequence of
Yeah.
continuing down this path.
Yeah. What if,
Yeah.
and then,
Yeah.
you know, this, as we said earlier at the top of the call, this is where burnout lives. So again, choices. And the interesting thing here is, and again, if we've got time, Eileen, to talk about the next part of this is how this rolls into um, performance being affected by over, overly stressed, overly tired. Do we have time for that conversation now?
Yeah, let's do it. Absolutely.
So the other element in my studies where I'm beginning to form opinions, I'm really not an expert here, right? But I'm beginning to form opinions around something that John Fazey and Lou Hardy created called the catastrophe model in 1988. And in short, they hypothesized that when arousal levels get too high, there's a sudden, um, a catastrophic drop in performance. um, because arousal leads to stress and stress leads to anxiety. And what I've found is that, or what I'm thinking about and what I'm taking from discussions I'm having from leaders, arousal is good. Arousal is excitement. Arousal is I'm getting ready to perform and I'm pumped up. And this is fantastic for leaders if it remains at that stage. But becoming overly aroused can become stress,
Hmm.
which again, in turn, is not a bad thing, right? There's still excitement with stress, provided that it doesn't go unchecked. Because if it goes unchecked, then it becomes anxiety, and it's
Yeah.
anxiety where that drop in performance happens. And when I think about this in the leadership space, I think about maybe that leader that's making their first big board presentation. They're hyped up, they're excited, their arousal levels are high, they can't wait to get into this, they're ready to go. And then suddenly the excitement starts to get the better of them. They're overly excited. They're overly thinking now what might go wrong. Their boss might start putting some pressure on by saying how important this meeting is, or moving the goalposts right at the last minute. I've had that.
Yeah.
I've had somebody that before a big presentation wanted to move a load of slides around, and I was like, oh my goodness.
No.
Uh, And so suddenly the excitement's gone and the fear you spoke about earlier is taken over. So the arousal's gone through stress and into anxiety, and suddenly there's this crash. And this is where performance is affected. And we end up with
Mm.
something that nobody wants to see. The extension of this is something that's called, in the sports world, is called the attention field. It's basically our vision and our focus. And this is where I'm drawing parallels between stress in the workplace and how that affects performance as it does with athletes. And what we're just to recap, arousal equals excitement. Stress is also excitement, but becoming a challenge if left unchecked. Um, but as long as it's under control, then it's good. If out of control, it becomes anxiety, and anxiety affects performance. So what's really interesting and what physically happens to us is with optimal arousal, our field of vision is kind of here in this area in front of us with some peripheral vision, but we're focused. This is optimal. Then low arousal has our vision kind of way out here, but not really focused on what's going on, and a very
Mm.
large peripheral vision. And what's interesting in the workplace, this is where I draw the parallel, is high arousal, stress, anxiety. Our field of vision narrows so much
Mhm.
that we can only see what's in front of us. In sporting terms, that might be that footballer getting hit from the side because they didn't see that tackle coming in.
Mm.
In the workplace, for me, it's complete and utter fascination on what's happening right in front of them, fixation on a particular thing. that's taking you down the wrong path, perhaps, that's not allowing you to think properly, that's not allowing you to see the bigger picture because you're so stressed, you're so focused of what's right in front of you. And as a result of that, you're completely missing opportunities.
So,
Fascinating.
it is for people who are like to geek out on this, you might wanna look into Barbara Fredrickson's research, her theory of broaden and build, because she talks about how positive emotions broaden and build are not only our minds, but our vision.
Mm,
And negative emotions, which come from negative thoughts, and then, of course, you've got that stress involved, narrow and constrict. And so
right.
she's done a tremendous amount of research on broaden and build as it relates to positive emotions and negative emotions. And again, I always like to clarify there is nothing wrong with having negative emotions or tougher emotions are very real and they're part of the full experience. However, as Darren's saying, is when you over index and get stuck there, then you can start to create an issue. I also wanted to call out a TED Talk, which you're probably familiar with, Darren, by Kelly McGonigal, and it's called "How to Make Stress Your Friend." So, it's an outstanding TED Talk. So, if there are some people here feeling like my stress levels are particularly high and they're not the arousal that's in that sweet spot and I'm
Yeah,
stuck in that, check out Kelly McGonigal's TEDx or regular TED Talk on how to make
right,
stress your friend.
right.
So,
Oh, that's
Darren,
wonderful.
as we wrap up, what do you hope our listeners leave as with the big takeaway?
I think there's two. I think it's a nice exercise and an important exercise to complete that pie chart yourself. How much of the pie is in train? How much of the pie is in perform? How much of the pie is in recovery? And
Yeah, I
what should
love
I
that.
adjust? And the other one is we have more agency than we allow ourselves to think.
Yeah, love. What is a mindset shift?
Do you know what? I think the shift is from not accepting showing up half ready, half energized, half thought
Mm, yeah,
to showing up.
yeah,
This is the moment where I need to perform and not accepting anything that was going to get in the way of that. Because
yeah.
remember, you're a multiplier. And if you can really inspire, if you can really create that energy amongst the people that you lead, then that's far going to outweigh those hours that you're putting in all by yourself.
Love that. And one teeny tiny action that somebody can do immediately after they finish listening to this podcast, something that will boost their ability to lead.
I honestly believe in that fun exercise of filling in that pie chart
Yeah.
and thinking about those three elements. Being honest, how much energy am I putting into training, to growing my ability, to my capability, to learning, to developing as a leader? How much time am I putting into recovery? How much time and effort am I spending with my coach? Because discussing a topic, analyzing a topic can also
Mhm.
be part of recovery, looking
Yeah.
for adjustments. So I think that honest view of where you're spending your time, um, I think that's a valuable exercise. And every leader that I've worked with to do that um, has found it fulfilling.
Yeah. And what is possible when somebody looks at that wheel and invests in not only performance, but also invests in training and recovery?
It's the gold medal, Eileen.
Eh, boom, mic drop. Darren Barrett, thank you for joining me on What's Possible.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.